Less than a minute, y'all. And I got two different clocks. One clock said it's no time, one says it is time. But anyway, woo, y'all know I had to push the time back. I stay honest with y'all. And man, I can imagine what pastors go through when preparing their sermons. Woo. Yes, all I could do is imagine it. But if I had more time, I would. I'm going to have to prepare them a little earlier. I'm being honest with you. But man, I got a lot going on right now. I hope you do too. And in fact, I hope you're watching the broadcast because you got too busy to watch the live cast. But that's not true. I want you to be here live because I got some things to laugh about with you. And God just always gives me these last minute inspirations. So let's get rolling with them, okay? Let's get rolling. Let's welcome you. Say goodness to you, and I say goodness because I don't know whether you're watching morning, afternoon, or evening. But isn't it great to have good in front of your salutation? What's going on? Wait, it took you a minute, Rogercarole. It took me a half an hour, okay? But I'm glad that you're able to be here, okay? Well, so welcome to Truth Thursday. Truth Thursday, okay? Where we know that tests are rarely understood until testimonies actually heal them. So, oh gosh, hold on a second. I got to go let my, oh no, I don't have to let him in. I got to tell him I'm on the broadcast. My exterminator guy is here. Let me see, on broadcast. Okay, enjoy. I got to send him a laugh. Okay, so anyway, tests are really understood until testimonies heal. And we always heard that saying that the truth shall set you free. Well, the problem with the freedom is that freedom can be a tough choice because freedom is actually a result. So the truth shall set you free, but freedom is a result. So what will freedom mean to you? Well, I have an affirmation for freedom, which is FREE. Facts, risk, empathy, and excellence. And an affirmation is an acronym that actually defines the word and turns it and brings it to life and turns it into an affirmation, thus an affirmation. And the affirmation for free being facts, risk, empathy, and excellence. Well, we have to look at the fact that we have to have facts for freedom, and then we have to have risk. Recognition is success's key, an affirmation within itself. When you recognize who you are, that impacts your freedom, and that's why freedom can be a result. So let's make truth, like the word truth, which is in my affirmations book also. But if you take freedom and risk and put those things together, we're reminded that once you decide who you are, you have to take a chance on being you. And we may not know how important that is to take the chance until we do. But I always say freedom is worth the risk. Take a chance on yourself. So getting into what truth stands for, we'll continue to start by embracing the first letters, and that's the word test. You can't get to the testimony without the test. Test is the root, and you can't have the freedom, the fullness, or the forecast of a testimony without the test. So this week, I'm continuing my quick 4-part series called the Time Series. Each week, you've given me words beginning with the featured letter from time. And my goal is to let your words guide me through God's message. This week's message features the letter I, and the words were volunteered by, glad to see you there, my co-authors, Rogercarole Rogers, who gave me the word iconic, Shirley, whose nickname is Tony Onyango, who gave me inspired and intrusive, and Bruce Brown, who gave me intelligent. My guiding scripture is Job 8:20-22. But look, God will not reject the person of integrity, nor will he make evildoers prosper. He will yet fill your mouth with laughter and your lips with shouts of joy. Those who hate you will be clothed with shame, and the tent of the wicked will be destroyed. And that walks us in today's message, which is dare to laugh. So think about what God just said. Those who laugh at those who hate you will be clothed with shame, and the tent of the wicked will be destroyed. So you should dare to laugh. Now, here's why I chose this title. I chose it based on my recent lesson learned from reading. I'm reading a Bible called the Warfighter's Bible, which is dedicated to our service members. And it has sections and blurbs which are called Did You Know? And so I learned that Isaac actually means he laughs. When Abraham and Sarah heard that they were going to have a son in their old age, they both laughed. That's what it says in Genesis 17 and 17 and 18 and 12. And in 17 and 17, it says, then Abraham fell on his face and laughed, and said to himself, shall a child be born to a man who is 100 years old? And Sarah laughed to herself, saying, after I am worn out and my Lord is old, shall I have pleasure? Then, when Isaac was born, they both ended up laughing. When Isaac was born, however, they and all their friends laughed with joy. And Sarah said, God has made laughter for me. Everyone who hears will laugh over me, which means laughing with her. So Isaac means laugh. And that's why I chose that. He laughs. And that's why I chose that, because who laughs? God laughs. So I decided to connect with to do today is connect my co-author's words to some places that made me laugh during my Bible readings over the years. Now, years ago, I had actually created a file called Bible Connections during a time where my reading goal was to look for patterns in scripture. See, I've read the Bible 11 times, but each time I read it a different way, and I'm looking for something different, as well as looking for some confirmation of what I do know. So there's been a combination of those. So I created a section called Bible Connections. And one of the headings I had under my Bible Connections was called Things That Make You Go, Because sometimes, you got you got to read the Bible and say, I never thought of it that way. Or wow, how did that come about? So this is so most of my things today are from the section called Things That Make You Go, So here are some hmms that I found in that section. First, using Rogercarole's iconic. I found some iconic hymns. Matthew 20 and 22 said, but Jesus told them, you don't know what you're asking for. Are you able to drink from the bitter cup of sorrow that I am about to drink? One of my favorite movies is A Few Good Men, where Jack Nicholson says, you can't handle the truth. And so I think about that as also in 2 Thessalonians 3 and 10, where it says, whoever does not work should not eat. Well, is that from James Brown? If you don't work, you can't eat. So those are some iconic words that we hear in the present that maybe their source was in the Bible. And here's that Jack Nicholson quote, because I turned it around to remind us that you can handle the truth. God laughs. When other people say you can't handle the truth, God says you can handle the truth. Then also, here's another one that says, can the ox boast greater power than the person who uses it? The axe, I'm sorry. Can the axe boast greater power than the person who uses it? Is the saw greater than the person who saws? Can a whip strike unless a hand is moving it? Can a cane walk by itself? Just reading this verse had made me laugh and think of my mother. She had a saying, can a bull skate? So, whenever somebody said something that was so stupid, she said, can a bull skate? So iconic. The Bible gives us some iconic things to look at in terms of laughing. And that's what I got from Rogercarole's. But I also want to say that he who laughs last, he who laughs last, their laugh lasts. So I want to also bring in another kind of laughter, and that has God getting the last laugh. And he gets the last laugh in 1 Kings, go backwards. I didn't put it up. I'm not putting it up there. But in Kings 1 Kings 22, 25, 24 through 25, which I read on the 50th anniversary of the March on Washington. I did put this in there. I think it got erased somehow. Let me see if I skipped it by accident. Nope. Oh, well, my bad. I thought I had it in there, but I don't. Okay, so, but anyway, in 1 Kings 22, 24 through 25, it says, Then Zedekiah, son of Kenah, walked up to Micaiah and slapped him across the face. When did the Spirit of the Lord leave me to speak to you? He demanded. And Micaiah replied, You will find out soon enough when you find yourself hiding in some secret room. And I know I've got that on here, so I'm going to click till I find it. There it is. Okay. So there it is, 1 Kings 22, 22, 24. And you know what that reminded me of? Think about that, where he says, When did the Spirit of the Lord leave you to leave me to speak to you? So he's laughing when he slaps who did he slap in the face? He slapped, I think it was Elijah. And then, but it reminds me of this, of Dr. King saying, turn the other cheek. Somebody slaps you in the face, turn the other cheek. And so actually I see that I forgot to take Tony's name off that should still be Rogercarole. Okay, y'all, you know what? I'm gonna have to take a break from these and get my brain together. But just think about that. You know, God always gets the last laugh. I think this was Elijah, by the way, talking to them, and you know, he had just prophesied something, and one of the prophets of that land slapped him in the face. And, you know, when did the Spirit of the Lord lead me to speak to you? Oh, I'm sorry. There he goes. Micaiah replied, You will find out soon enough when you find yourself hiding in some secret room. Now, you know, that's funny. Remember I said I read the Bible and I look for confirmation at times. It made me, I was thinking of someone else said, so I'm going to have to find this now because someone else says that in the Bible where he gets slapped. And he says, you know, he's got that same reply of getting slapped, and he said, and he's turning the other cheek. So I think that's where Dr. King got that from. But I'm going to put that in the chat once I find it, because I know that's a familiar line of a prophet coming up to somebody and saying, you know, who told you that you have, because they were trying to have favor with their king when they actually were not bringing a message of God. See, there goes a laugh. You have to think of stuff. So thank you, Rogercarole, for your words. Iconic. Oh, you know what? My bad. Let me go back here for a second, because see, there was the end of Rogercarole's words. Iconic. That was my last icon, my mother. So I didn't mess up. I forgot to mention that the next group of words were from Shirley's, the intrusive things, where Jesus said, you don't know what you're asking for. These were intrusive things. Can you drink from this cup of sorrow? And this prophet who got slapped. Okay, these are intrusive words. And that's where God got the last laugh when Dr. King says, turn the other cheek. And that moves us into the inspired word that Tony gave us, inspired. And that's, for instance, in 2 Samuel 11:2, God said, as Samuel looked out, as he looked out over the city, he noticed, oh, this is David. He noticed a woman of unusual beauty taking a bath. And that was David seeing Bathsheba for the first time. See, that's what I'm saying, the laughter in the Bible. For me, that was referencing movies only, okay? For me, referencing movies only, by the way. Why are people in biblical times cleaner than those in the Western times? You ever notice the Western movies, they look real dirty? And when you see them taking that one shower, the bath water, but here in the biblical times, they almost always are clean. Just something that came to my mind. That's what I'm saying. That's the laughter you have to have while you're reading the Bible. And then in Job 1:7 and in Job 2:2, both of these are separate. But here's what I want you to notice, that they sound like the exact same conversation in both chapters, as if they were reading from a cue card. And it shows that God uses no extra energy on Satan. See, one time he says, "Where have you come from?" The Lord asked Satan, and Satan answered the Lord, I've been going back and forth across the earth, watching everything that's going on. And then in Job 2:2, the Lord asked Satan, "Have you noticed my servant Job? He is the finest man in all the earth, a man of complete integrity. He fears God and will have nothing to do with Satan, with evil." So he has that same conversation with Satan both times. Before Satan, first time he tells him to consider Job, and then the second time he tells him to consider Job, because Satan is just running around looking for things to do, and God says, "Okay, you can touch him, but don't do this. Okay, you can do that, but don't do that." Remember, Satan has no final power. God still has the say so of what's going to happen in your life. God uses no extra energy on Satan in either Job 1:7 or 2:2. And this is a good thing. When you have these, you can go back and check and read them for yourself. And that's one thing I like to say, is that the best use you can be to your pastor is to confirm what they say, not as much as learn from what they say. You'll learn more when you confirm, because once you hear a preacher say such and such, and then he or she gives their analogy, you can say, "Oh yeah, that I do know that does make sense. I hadn't looked at it." And then you twist your analogy and makes it work. So see, I use the movies on my analogy with Bath Sheba, and then I use this with God and Satan, where God is reading from a cue card, and it's the same conversation, but it reminds you, don't give Satan any extra energy. Don't give the negativity in your life any extra energy. It's there. Recognize that it's there. Move on with your positive self. And then this one is also about being inspired. In Luke 4:24, jumping up, they mobbed him and took him to the edge of the hill on which the city was built. They intended to push him off the cliff, but he slipped away through the crowd and left them. Actually, this is still on Intrusive, but it made me laugh, because I'm like, how? if they mobbed him and they took him to the edge of the hill where they were going to push him off, how did he then slip away? See, just like in the movies, they were able to get him to the end of the cliff and then he slipped away. How? And so here's another how for me, because this is about Solomon. In Jude 15:4-5. Then he went out and caught 300 foxes. He tied their tails together in pairs, and he fastened a torch to each pair of the tails. Then he lit the torches and let the foxes run through the fields of Philistine. Again, how? Well, here's what I looked at when I thought about how. Here's some, and I decided to show you what my notes say, because here's some of the things that would have had to happen for this to be true. One, how did he get a herd of foxes? He would have had to get 300 foxes. He had to get a herd of foxes. He stored them so he could tie them in pairs. And then they were cooperative. The other 298 waited while he tied the first two, and another 296 waited while he tied the next two. Okay. And then he tamed the foxes. He had to tame them, because now that they were tied in twos, the two that got tied, they sat and waited their turn for them to do whatever he needed them to do, because he was going to tell them, okay, y'all going to go burn the Philistines' village. Okay. So he had to tame the foxes. Meanwhile, where did he store the torches that he used to light each of this? So it's 150 pairs of foxes. So again, I'm just laughing this to remind us that the Bible is there. That's the inspiration. It's there to tell us that these things may not have necessarily happened as they are written, but it's to inspire us to know we can go through great lengths, that God will go through great lengths to save us, to do his will. So just imagine that these are some of the things that had to happen. Be inspired and laugh at what's going on in your life sometime, because the last laugh is in Genesis 45:5-7, where Joseph is talking to his brothers. And he says, but don't be angry with yourselves that you did this to me, for God did it. He sent me here ahead of you to preserve your lives, so that you will become a great nation. What you meant for evil, God meant for good. God will always get the last laugh. So as you're dealing with tough situations in your life, don't worry about tying foxes' tails together and lighten them. Don't worry about the devil, Satan, trying to get to you like Job and make your faith falter. Recognize that God is doing something to you in your life. The devil has no power over you. God has the last laugh, and he uses no extra energy on Satan. I implore you to do the same, not use the extra energy on the negativity surrounding us today. And then what Lorenzo said, tough is great when you win in the end. Yeah. It's just like I say, freedom is a result. Yeah. Tough is when you win in the end. And wisdom being in retrospect, you look back and you say, man, that was tough. When you say that, how about saying, man, that was tough? Wow, I handled it. So if that was tough, I had to be tougher. Give yourself credit for the blessing that God keeps putting in your life. And see, nicely walks us into the final I, and that is intelligent, which Bruce gave us with the word intelligent. And we see it in 1 Samuel 17, 55 through 58. And this is a good laugh. Watch this. As Saul watched David go out to fight Goliath, he asked Abner, the general of his army, Abner, whose son is he? I really don't know, Abner said. Well, find out, the king told him. After David had killed Goliath, Abner brought him to Saul with the Philistine's head still in his hand. And Saul said, tell me about your father, my boy. And David replied, well, his name is Jesse, and he lives in Bethlehem. Here's the joke. You don't see it on the screen, but as you read the Bible, you'll find out. This is 1 Samuel 17 now, 55 through 18, 55 through 58. In 1 Samuel 16, 22, in 1 Samuel 16, by the way, Saul met David and actually had appointed him to play the harp to deal with his knuckleheadness. And there it is in 1 Samuel 16 and 22. Saul sent words to Jesse saying, please let David join my staff so that I'm very pleased with him. So look at that. That's in 16. Well, how come in 17 he said, whose son is that? And he asked Abner. And then when David comes back, he says, oh, who are you? Tell me about your father. And then David starts all over. See, so again, I have to laugh because I asked myself, what is this? Did he and Abner both have Alzheimer's, right? Early signs of dementia? See, it didn't start with us. It started in the Bible. So that's just something that once you start to read the Bible, you can find things to laugh at in that Bible. I'm telling you, it has some hilarious stories. And in that laughter, you get to embrace the story and then you get to do like what Lorenzo said. It's tough when you win in the end. You get to laugh and go back and look at what God was doing in your life. Who he sent somebody to try to mess things up for you just to test your faith and to show you that you can handle the truth. Okay. So that's what we have to do is don't forget, don't get that Alzheimer. Okay. Go back and figure it out. But lastly, Proverbs 26, 4 through 5. When arguing with fools, don't answer their foolish arguments, or you become as foolish as they are. When arguing with fools, be sure to answer their foolish arguments, or they will become wise in their own estimation. This reminds me of that saying, damned if you do, damned if you don't, right? So don't argue with fools or you become one. But then you know what? If you don't argue with them, then guess what? They'll think that they're smart in their own estimation. So damned if you do, damned if you don't, but don't argue with fools. And then in Jeremiah 1:17 through 18, this is God and I can do it. Perseveration is imperative, and imperative would have been a good I word. We can't handle. Okay, slow down, Sporty, because the messages come in with a delay. And so Lorenzo's taking us back to the perseverance and knowing that God is always going to win. And so that's what I'm saying. But here's again what we do. Don't argue with fools. You can't change somebody's vote and you can't change their frame of mind. unless they want to. And the one thing I say, for instance, on my page, I don't know, I don't believe I can change. If you are as committed to what you want to do, I don't believe that I'm going to change you and your thought pattern on my page in one reading. It takes time. It takes time. And if you have to decide how much time you want to invest in somebody else, if their ideology is opposite of yours. I'm not, I'm not here to change everybody's mind. Jesus said, I didn't come for everybody. And then when someone said, well, but even the dogs under the table get scraps from the owners, from their masters. And then Jesus said, oh, good answer. I came for you. I didn't recognize you. That's kind of the way I look at it. My sheep will know my voice. You're not here to please everybody. Please stop trying. I don't have and I'm saying that what I'm saying is that I don't have arguments on my page. If someone doesn't agree with what I post, or even doesn't agree with this message I'm delivering, they won't come back to the message. I don't need them to say that's wrong. First of all, it's not something that I lied about. It's in the Bible, and I'm giving my interpretation of it. That's why I said earlier, the best aid you can be to your pastor is to confirm what they're saying. So you read the Bible, so that if he or she misquotes the Bible, you can say, no, that's not what it says. Or you can say, yep, my pastor knows what they're talking about. In fact, here's another way of looking at what they're talking about. Maybe their analogy will strengthen yours, and therefore your faith will get strengthened. And therefore, as you go up against the enemy, you will be stronger because you've got your thought as well as the backup from what your pastor thought, or from what my post said, or from what Lorenzo just put in there. See, that's what it's all about. Gather stuff to make you stronger. And that's what I believe my page is for to encourage like-minded individuals. I'm not here to tell somebody who's against what I believe in that they are wrong. They're not wrong. They have their belief and they have the right to that. And so I like to know that, because that determines how much time I spend in their lives and then let them spend in mine. Because who you associate with will eventually become who you become. So back to this last one, Jeremiah 1:17-18. The funny thing is, get up and get dressed, go out and tell them whatever I tell you to say. See, God is saying, I got this. Jeremiah didn't want to go. And do not be afraid of them, or I will make you look foolish in front of them. Don't be afraid of them. See, today I have made you immune to their attacks. Now, what's funny about this to me also is this is a similar thing that he said to Moses. See, we're more familiar with Moses saying to God, I shouldn't do this. That's why I wanted to use Jeremiah, to give you another resource. God is saying these things all throughout the Bible. He's constantly reminding us, I got this. Stop letting the knuckleheads bring you down. Stop having these arguments with fools. Remember to look back and see what I brought you through. Give yourself credit. And even again, the Bible I'm reading is called the War Fighter's Bible. It's for the military. It's to remind, hey, you got this. You got this. And that's what I'm saying to you as well, because the truth is that daily life, like the Bible, is here to inspire us through the journey according to his will and always according to his goodness, because God is not sometimes good. He's always good. So I'm glad I left that up there. Lorenzo, I'm going to even edit it. Instead of God and I, good and I. Good and I can do it. Perseverance is imperative. We've got to persevere, and we can handle it. So yeah, it's tougher because it doesn't look like the last storm that you went through, but you went through. Even when you say, child, I'm just going through something, self-fulfilling prophecy. I'm going through. It's not over. I know who my pilot, whenever somebody's getting ready to take a flight, when I'm getting ready to take a flight and I text them and they say, well, have a good flight. I said, I'll tell the pilot because I know who my real pilot is. God is my pilot. And then last week I did a thing that I sent out a message saying, that in this true in Warfighter Bible, it says the book of Genesis reminds you of who the commander in chief is. And the question is, who's the commander in chief of your life? If God is the commander in chief and he is always good, then why would you think that things that are happening to you are not for your own good? Job is the most severe lesson that we get in the Bible. But realize that Job didn't have the Bible to read. Come on, we got Job. We got Job. And now with the internet, we got samples of people all over the country going through something. When we were growing up, those of us who are older, and even those who are not that old. Well, no, I got to leave it with those of us who are older, especially before the internet and a lot of media, radio stuff. I'm born and raised in New York. I didn't know what was going on in California, in Idaho, in New Mexico, in Alaska. And now I know. And so, when I didn't know, I said, well, this is what's happening to us. This is what's happening here. And sometimes that makes you the victim. What you've got to know is that this is happening everywhere. And people everywhere are getting through it. What can you learn from them that you can now transfer to you? It's just how we now see pictures of people who are born without limbs. That's not new. That was in the Bible. I can't say his name. Mephibosheth was one of Saul's sons who was born crippled because the nursemaid dropped him at birth. So these things have been happening all along, and now we see them and we find our ways to be compassionate with them. And so Lorenzo said, you may not like my passion, but respect my purpose. Yes, because I have passion in my purpose, and it's God directed always. And you have to respect that in somebody else's opinion. I respect people who don't believe in God. I do. Because you know what? As far as I'm concerned, they have to believe in God to not believe in him. So that's just the way I look at it. I'm not mad at them. You believe in what you want to believe in, but don't knock me for what I want to believe in. I'm not against anybody in their political views. I have mine. And since you can't talk me out of mine, why would I think I can talk you out of yours? If I can, then actually you want me to. And so really, I'm not talking you out of it. You come to help me be that little push over the edge that you needed. You just needed that confirmation. So it's a lot going on in our lives, y'all. But, they've been saying these are the last days for a long time. We're always living in the last days because guess what? You will not know when your last day is. You won't. Some of us will. Some of us won't know when it happens. Some of us will get the announcement. So great point. Make sure that your truths are for you. Your truths are for you. They're not always to be shared. The spook who sat by the corner and the spook who sat by the door by Greeley was one of my favorite books. It was about a black guy in the FBI who they put him in the FBI as a DEI hire. No, and let me not misuse the word DEI. They put him in there as an affirmative action hire. DEI is not about affirmative action because it's not strictly about race. That's a whole nother topic, and you know about it. But they did it to say, okay, we've got a Negro in the FBI. They didn't realize that he was actually in charge of a rebel group because he knew what was going on the inside. He knew the dirt that was going on. And again, this is where social media and news and technology have moved us forward. Corruption there's always been corruption in the governments, but it's which ones are corrupt. And now we know more of the corruption. But, sometimes it was just the people in this area who knew they had a corrupt system, but the other system, it wasn't corrupt. So they didn't get it. Well, what are you talking about? Everything is fine here. They have their own truth. And so that's what you got to think of. So what Rogercarole said, one of the challenges of social media is that people tell too much. Yeah. and you know what? Let me add to that, Rogercarole. They tell too much of what they don't know. They tell too much with with not enough information. And that's what happens. Sometimes somebody who tells too much because they're going on and on and on is because they keep adding something and now they're starting to add their opinion instead of what the facts are. Remember, free, FREE, facts. You need facts to set yourself free. And then that's the risk. It's recognition is success is key. See, so it all comes together, and you get a hello there from Lorenzo. But thank you both for that. Just remember that. And what did you say, Lorenzo? I got my MD from Facebook. A doctorate degree, right? From Facebook, from people talking about too much. I was on a broadcast panel last week, and there was a question about, I was saying how I don't honor the First Amendment on my page. I don't honor freedom of speech. And that's what I was just telling y'all about in that long rant about not letting people post their negativity against what I'm saying on my page. But the moderator said, well, why do you think people put their negative response to what you do? And I said, you know what? I don't know. I choose not to say, well, this is why they do it. They are this type of people. I like what Rogercarole said. It's just that they put too much. I don't know what their reason is. And here we go. Ignorance and arrogance. First of all, ignorance means you just don't know something. Arrogance means you think you're in charge of everything. Those are two of the reasons. I don't know why. See, that's what and then we laugh because later in the broadcast, one of the other panelists said, well, I do this because of that. And I said, you know what? That's a good reason. I'm glad I said I won't say why people answer my post the way they do, because he had a good reason for why he would put something against somebody. Now I'm thinking, and I'm trying, it's too much of an example to give the easy way, but I want to say to you, don't decide why somebody is answering the way they are, other than one of the things what Lorenzo said, it's their passion. It's there. And so that's, for me, it's, tomorrow, by the way, spoiler alert, tomorrow I'm doing on my Gift Friday, I'm doing a poem that I created called, Yeah, We Can Speak, But We Ain't Speaking. So you can just talk, you can be civil to somebody, but recognize, what, this is not this person. We don't have any conversation. We don't have anything in common anymore. And see, and that may be where the ignorance and the arrogance comes in. You may not know that we're not speaking anymore because you're too arrogant to recognize that what you did to me is it's forgivable, but it's not forgettable. One of my beliefs is I forgive and forget, but the penalty still applies. See, I don't have to, I forgive you, but it's about what God, your relationship with God is important. More importantly, mine is. So God, to me, God has had you do these things for me to be mindful. Thank you, to not be judgmental, but to be mindful of what you did in my life. And if I have to get the signal from you that, hey, this is what I do to people like you. And so are you going to keep me in your life? That's how I look at it. That's just how I do things. Think about it. Job argued with his boys they can't, no, Job, you're wrong. This is what you need to do. And they were Job said, nah, y'all got it wrong. This is what God is doing in my life. He stuck to his passion. We could go on and on and on. And that goes back to what you said, Rogercarole, about putting too much. Sometimes say what you got to say and get out. Somebody disagrees. Okay, good. Thank you. Thank you. You believe what you believe. But remember that, and this is what I want to say to you, that all scripture, and we find out in 2 Timothy 3:16, all scripture is inspired by God and is useful to teach us what is true and to make us recognize what is wrong in our lives. And see, we didn't practice this. When you look back at Rogercarole and Lorenzo's remarks, they go right to what we're just saying here. We didn't practice that. They didn't know I was going to put this in there. But that's the point. Everything, all our passion and what we think is our truth is inspired by God. And it's useful to teach us. All scripture is useful to teach us to not be judgmental, to be careful of our ignorance and our arrogance, and to help us realize what's wrong in our lives, not in somebody else's. What's going on in your life that's making the difference? And that's a reminder that the writers of the Bible are not God, but people. Thus, one of my beliefs is in encouraging my fellow poets, especially my younger poets, to understand that all of their poetry is good. I used to be artist in residence for poetry at Purdue University's Black Cultural Center. It was called the Haraka Writers. And when they'd say, Mr. Sporty, you know, do you think this poem is good? I'm like, yo, it came through you. That poem is the bomb. You know, the first thing I say to any poet when they say, is this poem good? I say, yes. You haven't even read it. I don't need to read it. It's through God. It's from God through your hands and your mind. And so I always said that you don't need someone else's approval for what God has put in you. It is a gift to have your heart and hand inspired to transmit God's thought. And that's one of the reasons that I titled my book. I wanted to put that there. I'm sorry, I forgot. I wanted you to see that. This is what, to me, all scripture is about. And that's the reminder. That's the note I wrote to myself. That's what I just read to you. And so it's just something I want you to be able to have if you want to copy that and keep that as an affirmation. But that's why I titled my book, A Poet in Every Prophet. Notice that the word prophet has a P-O-E-T. Everything as a poet writes is prophecy. And so as you listen to our young poets, my nephew Ja, I did a post on him week before last when they've created a series called Black Charlotte. What's it called? A Black Charlotte album. I'm gonna put that link in the chat also. But it's about it's Charlotte's history through the eyes of some young Black poets, but through the eyes of the Black community. And so, you have to, it's prophecy. God said, here, I want y'all to write about this. And I went to the grand opening, and I mean, it was fabulous. It's not playing again. But I posted some clips from it. And there's when I posted in the chat, you'll see where you can go and you can actually hear some poems from the album and download it. So please go do that. All right. Look, let's get ready to move on out of here. And remember that tests, remind us to dare to laugh, because tests are rarely understood until their testimonies heal them. And that freedom is a tough choice. Why? Because freedom is a result, as we learn from what Lorenzo said as well. Find the comfort in God's pace and his patience. And remember that God laughs. So how could you not? Dare to laugh at the nonsense that's going on in your life. And remember, that's what God put you here for. All right. So next week, my focus is going to be on the letter M. Let me get myself back up there. There we go. Let's get Lorenzo's comment. Affirmation is a plus. However, if you know your positive purpose, it keeps you strolling in grace. Next week, my focus is going to be on the letter M. So put words in the chat that begin with the letter, in the thread that begin with the letter M, and I'll get that. And as you can see from today's, I never know what direction I'm going to go in. So your words will help guide me, because why? You're just like the prophet in the poet and the prophet, where you give me something that God gives you, and then I do what God had gifted me to do with it. So thank you, Rogercarole, Tony, that was Shirley, and Bruce, for your words today. Next week, we're going to focus on the letter M. Even if you're watching the video, you can still put a word in there and I'll get it in. I've got a whole week. All right. But just remember that God is good and momentous. Yes, because we got to pick up the momentum. Momentous is also from momentum, or momentum is from momentous. But we got to keep it going. And again, as we think about time, let me put one more connection in there, because it is about time. And though I said Isaac stands for laugh, it's always time to laugh. So that was the connection. And so momentous, your time, over time, you pick up momentum and then you get stronger, which is what momentous can be about. And millimeter, it's just a little, change is not this huge thing that we think it is. Time is change. And change comes in small doses, in millimeters. But we think change is huge, and we sometimes don't recognize that we are masters of change. We have handled so much change. Give yourself credit in the millimeters and the milliliters and the minis, all the checkpoints of change and time. And because there's a book there's a book I read called The 1 Minute Manager. And the quote that goes throughout the book, if you read, he said, yeah, time is something we always have. It's funny because even though they say, life is short, time is short, but time is something you actually always have until it's over. So, and the time is now. I got a great text from my brother Marvin. Marvin Blakely in New York. He's in New Jersey. Well, he's in upstate New York, but we went to school together. And he just blessed me, sending me a text today, just telling me he appreciates how I live my life. and go. I ain't gonna quote him, but let me see how that one thing he said that I think it was living out my passion or dream. Yeah, living your best life. That's what it was. And he said, I'm proud to know you and your voice. So thank you, Marv. I give him that shout out. And thank all of you who tune in and share this message. Rogercarole, Lorenzo, thank y'all, because y'all have been the wings beneath my sails, and y'all keep me going. Vic is going to tune in, Daphne, Bruce. These are the names of my regular people who come on, and it lifts me up. But all of you who send me emails after you see the broadcast, Ruby, Jennifer, Rob Ford, my brother James in Ohio. Oh my gosh, since I didn't plan to say it now, I can't think of all the names, but as they used to say on, you know who you are. Look, thank y'all. God bless you. Let me give a 10-second countdown and get on out of here and let y'all get back to the rest of your day. So 10, 9, 8, 7, 6, 5, 4, 3, 2, and 1. Thank you all. God bless you, and have a wonderful Truth Thursday. Peace.